Hi, everyone. It's Jan Guarino, and you are in Fearless Watercolors. And we are doing a springtime image of a photograph. I'll show it to you of cherry blossoms. It's a close-up. So it's going to be a lot more vibrant. We'll work on the colors that we're going to be using. I did turn it a little bit more this way because I thought that that made a beautiful diagonal going through rather than the vertical. So I just turned it a little bit and it gave me some more flowers that I kind of fudged along the bottom. Now, there's a couple of things I want to point out here. There are these very white whites, and I did mask them, okay? It does look chaotic. I am not going to kid you. And true to form, I have no idea what it's going to look like when I lift the masking fluid. I really, truly have no idea, but we're going to see. But I want to talk about also the colors we're going to use and just do a little bit of a warm up to get that beautiful blue sky. What color are we going to use for that? And what color are we going to use for these blossoms? As well as what color are we going to use for the ones that are in shadow? Because the ones that are in shadow need to go much more muted. And that really is the power of this photograph. It's these bright whites, it's the blue sky, it's these flowers that are in shadow, and it's the deep dark color of the branches. So there's a few things going on here. So let's talk about the colors first. Let's start with our color sky. I really love my cerulean. It looks a little bit not as purple as this sky. So if I went down and got a little bit deeper, if I added maybe a little bit of cobalt to it, let's see what the cobalt looks like. That's a little truer. Maybe a combination of my cerulean and my cobalt might be my color. Does it have to be exactly this color? No. What is important is that it's that same vibrancy. Okay, that's what's going to be important. I wonder if I just drop a little bit of violet in there. And I just dropped a little violet in here, and that looks like it's kind of a similar feel to what it might be. But I think that I think I'm just going to stick with my blues. So maybe depending on what manufacturer you have, that is my ultramarine. That looks a little bit more accurate. Now, sky is not exactly the same everywhere. So if your ultramarine went into your cerulean a little bit, that also would be fine. So my ultramarine really does match this if we wanted to do matchy-matchy. You have to see what works for you. And let's get those pink blossoms. Now, I have these Holbeins that are lilac and lavender, and they probably will do this. I think this is the lilac, the lighter color. That's probably going to do a pretty great job of giving us those really soft pinks. If you added masking, which I did, I really went through and saved my whites, you will, the process will be as I'm going to be demoing it, which is putting a wash over everything. If you didn't, I think that your blossoms would have this softness to them, maybe a little bit more water where the sun is hitting it. And then when it's dry, going in and deepening the color, and that'll make it appear light, bright, whiter. Does that make sense? So as we deepen it, even the wash that we have there will be a lighter color, and it might not be the white of the paper. And I don't know, the white of the paper may just be too much, and I may go over it with a whole wash. So that's my thinking. To create some of these shadows here, I'm thinking of doing my either shadow violet or my moon glow, which I think would give us a beautiful shadow. So far we have, I'm thinking ultramarine, ultramarine. marine for my sky. I'm thinking the Holbein. But if you don't have these Holbein lavender lilacs, they really are beautiful colors. I really recommend them. Holbein lilac, and then this is the Daniel Smith Moon Glow or Shadow Violet. They're not necessarily Shadow Violet. Sorry for my handwriting there. They're not really synonymous. The Moon Glow has more violet in it. The Shadow Violet has a little less. It's a little more gray. That's the Shadow Violet, but they'll both do the trick. Now, the only thing missing, of course, we do have a little bit of yellow. We'll add that later, okay? But what I want to concentrate on is now creating our darkest color. And this, I think, is one of the things that makes my classes sort of more unique than others. And that is I don't just go into my palette and get black or Payne's gray or any brown. I like to create it from what I have here. So if we go in and use let's start with a little bit of Moon Glow. That looks really good, right? Or even if we add a little bit of Shadow Violet to that, that's a beautiful color. And these colors both break into pinks and blues and violets. Perfect. I also think it will be really far more interesting to drop in a little bit of my blue, a little bit of my lilac into this to give it a little bit more depth and to bridge the palette. Okay. And I'm just going to try a little bit of yellow in here also. And that will give us, I'm going to go a little closer and show that to you. All the colors are in here. And that will make your branches much more interesting. It will not be one-dimensional. It'll have a multitude of colors in that. And that is how I'm thinking of building all of this. I wanted to show you guys before, hold on one second, a photograph that I found. It's actually something I saw of a friend of mine's painting. And just give me 1 second, because it's a perfect example of, while these are not complementary colors, these are analogous. The blues and the pinks and the violets all sit next to each other on the color wheel. The yellow tends to be the one thing that is on the other side of the color wheel. So I just want to show you, if I could access it fast enough, this painting that I thought really said so well. Okay, here it is here. I'm just going to highlight this in my share screen for a moment. And while it's nothing like what we're painting, that is not why I'm showing it to you. I'm showing it to you because I want you to see how she arranged the blues and the oranges. And even though those blues probably didn't exist in those flowers up on top and on the side, she handled it so beautifully, and the blue really, the oranges and the blues really carry your eye through. So I wanted to share that with you because all of these colors really do allow us to bridge the palette. And I thought that was such a great example of that. So I wanted to share that with you. I like the idea of sharing these things with you because it really does give us a different perspective on how people handle it. So if you wanted to just stick with one color on your branches, certainly your Moon Glow Shadow Violet would do the trick. If you wanted to add a little bit of blue into it, I think that's a really, again, it just makes your painting that much more interesting and less predictable. And those colors, by the way, you could pre-mix them in your palette if you like, or drop the color right into your wet paint. And even if you dropped a little, I just dropped a little Guarino in there. And I may drop in a little bit of that's a little bit of Quin Gold. So quite a few options, but that's what I'm planning on doing with my branches, okay? So this is just a combination because of course we will be adding that yellow. And I think it's going to have to be a lemon yellow because again, the lemon yellows tend to be a little bit, have more opacity to them. Let me just fire these up a little bit. Little dumb Arabic. So the lemon yellow has an opacity to it. And so that would sit on top of these other white areas once we're done. Okay, so that is our game plan. The first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of white paper. For those of you who didn't mask, I wouldn't worry about it because it's just going to make it a little bit different. I understand why you didn't mask, and I was not sure if I was even going to. If you have a sponge, this might be a better way to actually wet your paper because your brush will have a tremendous amount of water on it. But with the sponge, we can take a lot of it out and just wet the paper a little bit all over. Now, if you want to leave some sparky whites, go right ahead. That just means where you put your water down, it didn't go into every spot. And I just find with a sponge, I'm able to control it a little bit better. I don't normally tape my paper down either, but I'll tell you why I did it was because it was the last sheet in my block, and it it ended up falling off. So I just taped it down. Now, I'm not going to really pay too much attention to where things are at. I'm going to tilt my paper a little bit. So I'm going to work a little bit on an angle, and I'm going to start on the top, and I'm just going to start dropping my colors in. My blues, my violets, just a little bit pinks. Now, of course, the water gives us an opportunity for it to, you can see I'm not really paying much attention to where things are going because all of these colors are going to be in the entire painting anyway. So I'm using a little Guarino, I am, and my ultramarine. Those are the two colors I'm using right now. And I'm just holding my whole palette, my whole block rather, on an angle. And I'm just letting it drip down. I'm using a big mop brush just to kind of get myself in and around the painting easily. And if you're using your blue and your pink, you're already seeing that you're getting some kind of purples in there. And I have one of my hairs in there. But what a beautiful way to get rid of your white paper. Knowing that we did save a little bit of a whole lot of white if we masked. Now, I am going to go in and follow a little bit with my reference photograph and maybe just drop in a little bit more blue in certain areas and let that kind of just seep down. Just let it seep down. Don't worry if it runs into anything else. It doesn't really matter. Because remember, this is such a great way to just bridge the palette because it means that all your colors are merging into other colors. There's a nice big blue area in that lower corner, so you may want to charge that up a little bit, but it's real soft. And I'm certainly not painting the sky. I'm just indicating where a little more sky might be popping out, right? And this is also such a great way to not worry about it so quickly, so early on, doing something. You want to be freer with your paints. This is a great way to do it. This is being looser. This is being freer. Otherwise, we could have started with every little piece being done perfectly. That's, you know, we all kind of know that way to paint, right? We do. We know that way to paint. If it's collecting on the bottom too much, just turn your paper the other direction. Maybe let it go to the left and right a little bit. But I like the idea of it kind of streaking down. Maybe you want it streaking on an angle. Oh, that's a good idea. I didn't think of that, but I like that. And I'm putting it on with a smaller brush right now because this brush holds less water. If it collects along the bottom, you could just kind of mop it up with your brush a little bit or turn it the other direction. But that's a really good way to start. Now we have to be somewhat careful because we don't want all our colors to bleed everywhere. We do want to give this a chance to dry, right? And so I definitely have pink where maybe I would have some blue sky. Maybe just go in as areas are drying while we're waiting for the whole thing to dry. And in between the areas, you don't have to go in between the branches because they're going to go darker. But if you have an outline of where your flowers are, you might want to go around those a little bit. Go through the branches. Don't save the branches. Okay. That is probably one of the, oh gosh, I see that all the time. Saving your darks. You don't have to save them because we're going to build them, and you don't have to worry about what color is in them because we're going to be using all the colors to build those branches. It is one of those very funny things that I learned early on that I could build a dark, not save it. And it's funny, I say it and then I go around and I see people saving their darks, you know. So it just takes a little practice, that's all. A little thinking. See, we took a little time, we took our time to observe, to think, to plan, right? Observe, think, and plan. That's all we did. And if you want to switch into some other colors in your sky, I just dropped in a little bit of cerulean because it's a really great vibrant blue. And our sky doesn't have to be the exact same everywhere, right? Does not, should not. So I'm just really using my ability to drop in and add more color while it's wet, while it's damp. You're going to find that your paper is different areas are drier than others. I'm biding your time right now, and I'm giving you a chance to build on your painting while other parts are dry. That's what we're doing. And probably you guys know that I'm doing that to you already. And I do notice a shift in the sky as it comes over here. It's a little bit warmer. It's a little cooler up here. I do see a difference. So if you want to switch to a little bit more cerulean on your lower right corner, I think that's a good thought. And if it collects too much in one bottom or on the side, just shift your paper a little bit. Just use gravity to your benefit here. And so I'm not really getting blossoms in here because the paper is wet, but my brush is not very wet. My brush is not that wet. And so it's giving me the opportunity to drop even more color in than what's on there. I'm not really ready for any hard edges, just a very soft feel. Bide your time and drop in your blues. See, the masking fluid is going to halt me from going too close to the blossoms, where I wanted to save those whites. But I thought about this and I thought about the folks that probably wouldn't mask, and which is fine. It's absolutely fine that you didn't mask. But even the areas that are light here, right, that I didn't mask, but it's just a pale color, I think that would be absolutely fine not to worry about, because we can build those darker colors. So this is all pretty wet. All of my blues are pretty wet. This cluster right here, call me crazy, but I did put it in the center of the paper, and I really normally don't do that. But we'll just say, well, we're a little Georgia O'Keeffe today, where she put everything in the center. I normally am a little bit more cognizant of doing that, but there you go. I just noticed that I did that. So I'm going in here, and again, this is pretty wet in here, and I'm dropping in a little bit of Verzino and a little bit of the lilac. And really the lilac is just a Verzino with white in it. And if you go into the branches a little bit, don't worry, because we are going to build all of those branches with these colors. We could, by keeping the color up here a little bit off center, maybe making this a little bit brighter up here. We could carry the eye through and with the vibrancy. So if you want to play with your composition a little bit, maybe we'll go a little darker in here and have our pinks kind of carry us over here into that way. So what I'm doing is I'm carrying the eye through with color. So maybe I'm changing my composition a little bit with color. And it's still so soft, and it's still too early to really worry about where colors are going right now. And I think these are just one of those paintings that we're going to need to dry it and lift the masking long before we're finished. So by having a little color up here, maybe on the upper right, we could carry the eye through the painting, right? We could do that beyond the photograph that we see and be able to create a sense of movement with color and with whites and with darks. So you'll notice I'm moving around the painting. I'm not staying in any one spot. I think when you paint in one spot too much, you tend to have it be tighter, right? We want to be a little looser with this. And certainly there's going to be spots that are drying on your paper. Early on. Now I am going in and, believe it or not, I'm adding my dark early on. It's spreading a little bit. It's a little drier over here than other spots. So if you could find a dry spot to, or a drier spot, it's not entirely dry. It is moving a little bit. You can see it, right? I'm on that right side of the paper, a little above the middle, because not every branch has to be exactly in focus. So this is just a little bit of my moon glow. And you could see I'm building my dark. This takes a little bit of, planning, thinking, but I know moon glow and shadow violet both break into violets and blues and pinks. So I know I'm not getting any mud. Now, if you're more comfortable with drying your paper, I'm going to just try to work around areas that are drier. So this is a little wet up here. So I'm going to hold off on painting it. You notice I just feathered it away so that I don't have a hard edge anywhere. This is just a little bit of a bleeding, but it's going to go into a few different directions. So I can take that and work with that. Now, there's also a tendency when you see masking to paint around it. What you want to do is you want to paint right up to it. That's what makes it show up. So I'm using my King Art number 10 to do this. I really am going in and getting a lot of color on my brush and not a lot of water because my paper's pretty wet still. I'm going to move around and I'm going to find other spots that are a little bit drier and not as bumpy. I think I could come over here. And this is why I had said to be sure when you did this to have your marks be a little bit darker, because you'd be working on a piece of paper that has color already that we put on it. And as you come up to the flowers, the petals, notice that there's let me go a little closer on this. You want to be sure to paint up to the petal and hold on to some of the beautiful aspects of these petals. And you also want the other side of the branch to be jagged. There's a real gnarly look to the branches of a cherry blossom. And so you want to hold on to that. I even did like little holographic kind of marks here. It's kind of fun to do with your brush. It's just a fun way and a great way to get yourself a little looser and yet go in and find the beautiful details that are in there. So I'm paying attention to these petal edges, really important. And some of them are just going to melt into the shadows that the petals are creating. So just a little melt right here. Let me show you where that is on the whole thing. So just a little melt right in here. Why? Because I could. It was a good time to do it. Everything doesn't have to be perfectly, exactly, precisely outlined. And because we know we are not going to get any kind of mud here, If we were using orange, yeah, we'd get mud. If we were using, because of the blue, the pink, it's kind of between a blue and a violet. So yellow would be that, but we haven't used those colors yet. But I do think it'd be nice to add some, this is a little too wet. I could just see it spreading a little bit too much. Maybe that's good. I'm going to go with it and see what happens. I can always go back in and define it a little bit more. The photograph is highly defined. My painting does not have to be. That's the difference. And when people say, oh my goodness, it looks like a photograph, well, not really. I don't find that to be all that interesting to see high reality photographs. Oh, is it amazing when they paint these high realism? Yeah, you have to understand that they're putting 40, 50 hours into them. They're really putting a lot of time into them. In that time frame, I don't have 10 paintings done. That's the way I roll. Okay, this is this continuation of this branch here. This is drier here. Remember, if you masked, be sure to come right up to the masking. And really look at those gnarly, cool shapes that the branches are creating. They're beautiful. And they're so interesting. And it gives it a really interesting flow and really get some nice darks going on in here. If your moon glow or shadow violet isn't dark enough, or you want to add even a little bit more interest, go ahead and add some pink and blue to it. I'm getting a pretty good dark with mine, but I'm going to add a little blue just because I said I was going to. And that really did a lot. I have to say, adding that really does look great. Even though I know it's going to break up into those colors. You may not see it quite on the recording, but it's there. And then be sure to stop. Now, see, I know I masked here, so I know my edge of my petal is right here. I know that. So I want to paint right up to it and go right over my masking fluid. That's why we mask, so that we could go right through it and it saves our whites. Softer in spots, a little more intense in other spots. I think my rigor, my beloved rigor, is a really great way to build. This is a little drier. Notice how far back I am on my brush. I'm not up here, okay? I'm pretty far back on that rigor brush because it gives me a chance to kind of be on the barrel of it and just go back and forth and wiggle it back and forth to get some really nice marks. And if you're not ready to finish it, just feather it off. I don't really know if I'm ready to do all of that, but I'll. Because you'll notice that, and what's interesting about this is some of these petals are in front of and some are behind the petals. if you feel like you want to, this is a good time. I'm in the upper right corner here. Might be a really nice time to just give some of those flowers that are up here some of that moon glow to really create that beautiful shadow color in there. Yep. I can always go back in and redo that dark of the bark. Build your darks. So that's just a moon glow wash. A wash of moon glow. It already feels this changed the dark, vibrant value of the branches and this shadow really started building the painting. That's why I'm working all around on this one. I mean, I generally do, but it really made sense to do it on this one. I think about these things. I really do. I have to think about it. It's funny, I get the paintings and I'm like, okay, that's a challenge. How am I going to teach that? How am I going to paint it? And what you probably realize by now, by working with me as much as you guys all have, is that I'm challenging myself right with you. I've never painted this before. I don't have a formula for it, but actually, my formula is what I said: observe, think, and plan before I put my brush to the paper. So I literally am in the thick of it with you. I don't know. Hopefully, you're comforted by that. I don't know. That's kind of funny to say that, but it's true. So much of this is just letting this go. And this is something I'd like to say to myself, and I do say it in the class all the time, and that is if we were to stop now and not do much more, anybody would know not only what we're painting, but what kind of flower this is. That they're on branches. So just thinking about that should give you the sense of um, how much more do you need to add to tell the story? That's the question. How much more do you need to tell the story? Okay, I'm in the upper left-hand corner now, and I'm just giving, again, those shadow shapes using a little bit of moon glow and a little bit of pink to kind of build these shadow flowers. Keep your brush moving. Be on the barrel, be on the tip. Because when I made a black and white of this, these shadow flowers were actually darker than the sky, which was pretty interesting. It's a good way to do a value study. If you're not much into value studies, and I know they say to do it, but I'm not for it too much. I really am not. I kind of think I see it in my head, what makes sense. But not everybody is that of that mindset. You know, I am, but not everybody is. So by doing uh, a black and white printout will give you a really good sense of what is lighter and darker, what is darker. So again, this is Moon Glow, but when it comes to these petals, I am dropping in a little bit of Verzino. And I'm not painting botanicals. That's not what I want to do. I like the freedom of this medium. This medium gives us a tremendous amount of freedom if you let it. Doesn't have to. You could be as tight as could be with it. And that's the truth. And you used watercolors, so therefore it's considered a watercolor. To me, I want to utilize all the beautiful aspects of this medium. And so much of it is just this when to work wet into it, when to work drier, what happens to the paper when I'm doing that, what happens to the paint, how does it move, what is it different, what makes it look different. Those questions all come up. You guys are very quiet. Hopefully you're good. Just keep moving around, using the wetness of the paper and the different levels of dryness of it. You'll get a different result on each pass. Every single pass would be a little bit different. I'm going to throw this whole bottom flower into shadow with a little bit of Moon Glow. Tiny bit of pink, but mostly Moon Glow. Don't worry if you're slower than I am. I know many of you are feel, you can't work at the pace that I'm going. Do not worry about it. Go at your own comfort speed. But hopefully some of the ideas here are pushing your thinking a little bit beyond what you would have before starting. So much of the marks that I gave you on the contour are simply shapes. I don't believe we are painting flowers as much as we are painting the shapes that the flower is receiving from the sun and its shadows, right? That's really what we're painting is sun and shadows. So, and that creates the color, creates the flowers. When you paint a botanical, yeah, you're painting the flower. When you're painting this way, you are painting light and shadow, which is how I approached the masking fluid. I approached the masking with shapes. So if you didn't do it this time, you may want to try it, this one or another one, with just thinking of, yeah, there's a tendency to get a little lost in there. However, if you're thinking shapes, you'll be able to, the shapes that the light hit. And you'd see it if you went into black and white. And look at your reference. Don't forget to look at your reference. I'm referencing my photograph all the time. And I keep noticing to be looser, I'm further back on my brush. I'm not sitting so close to it. I'm sitting, my hand is further back. And it helps create a little bit more calligraphic mark. I've never done it, but I'm sure you guys know exactly what I mean when I say that when the Chinese are writing, they're on the top of their brush, right? They're like working way up here and making their marks. I think that's something to be said about that. We really do. I like that idea. So if I'm down here, I'm making a very different kind of mark than if my brush is up here. Allow the brush, and you have the beautiful marks, allow them to help you create this beautiful pattern that's going on here of lights and darks. And again, I'm all over this paper. I am absolutely all over it. I'm working, sorry, excuse me. I'm working in a way that gives me the freedom to build the painting. And by working that way, also you're giving your painting a chance to evolve, right? You are all great painters, all of you. I've seen every single one of your work. You all get it. This is what I feel is probably the next step for so many of us, is that just taking that plunge into more of the unknown to let something evolve for us. The control or lack of control, right? That's watercolor. Control, no control. You can control it, absolutely. Or you could let it control you. And I only let that go so far. I only go so far with letting it control me, but I like the idea of pausing and waiting and seeing what happens as a result of letting it do its own thing, seeing what's going to happen, right? Allowing it to be a watercolor. There's kind of thing going on over here. This mossy thing, I really like that. So be where you have to be. Paint at your own pace. The concept of working the way we just worked is plenty of information for you to access and think about. I'm going to introduce a little lemon yellow over here. This is on the middle part of the right side where those buds are. And that lemon yellow has got a little bit of green in it. It's nice. It's all bleeding into each other. I'm okay with all of that. Again, I am not a botanical painting girl. A little bit of yellow, nice. You could drop in into any little area that maybe you want to, if it's a little wet, that's okay. It just goes soft. And to do it on top of the moon glow, well, that's sort of a compliment, meaning the yellow on top of the violet does make it go a little muddier. It tones it down. And knowing color wheel and knowing that that's how you will always understand. If you understand color wheel, you'll always understand why you will get mud or won't get mud, or how to build a painting using shades of gray. Just dropping a little bit of yellow here and there just to see what happens. Some it's softer, some it's a little clearer. Work where it's dry if you want a sharper mark. And I'm really actually thinking that it's not a bad time to start drying my paper and seeing what is going on with my masking fluid. Not quite yet, but I'm sort of getting there. I'm getting curious because who knows? Really, who knows? It's not the end all big reveal that at the end, there's still work to be done. There's still work to be done. So if you're a little lost, I think that that's pretty much where you're going to be, is a little lost. But if you could find the shapes that are in the shadows on the flowers, trust those shadows. Not easy to do, but well worth it. You know, I'm hesitant to go in and add more blue. I think in spots, maybe I can. And this is ultramarine. It's probably one of those paintings that you just noodle around with for as long as you really want to after, you've sort of achieved a certain amount of completion. I really recommend everybody just take a moment to pause from what you're doing, put it vertical, and stand back from it a little bit. And I can see if you're not doing it. finish the brush stroke that you're making and stand back and just look at it, and it will look entirely different. Yeah, take a moment, take a breath. Trust that. I've mentioned this before. I have a screen to my right that is vertical, and I could see what's happening, and I utilize that to tell me what I just did, if it needs anything, any adjustments or changes, right? But if I'm just working flat, I don't really have um, that feedback. This is your feedback. And do it as frequently as you can. If you're not working on an easel and we're not working on an angle, which most of us don't, I use the angle to kind of achieve a certain amount of movement with the watercolor. If you're not working that way, then you're at a disadvantage. And we are. I mean, it's just the fact is that we are at a disadvantage to oil painters or I guess acrylic also that work on an easel and work and can take a look at what's going on and stand back from your work. We don't do that enough. And Dodie, you were in those night classes where we would put all the paintings. I think we did it in the daytime too. We'd put all the paintings vertical and everybody looked at it and like, oh, it's better than I thought. It's better than I thought. Oh, it looks good. I didn't think that worked. You know, those kinds of pieces of feedback we're just constantly hearing those words. And I laughed every time I heard that because it is so true. So my paper is still pretty wet. And I'm thinking the next step for me is to really carefully dry this so that I'm not melting or adhering the masking fluid to my paper. You got to be a little do that gingerly, I should say, because you definitely want it to be not on the hottest heat setting. I don't know what it would do. It might make it harder to come off. So when you're drying it, be sure to be a little further back on your heat setting there. And I won't know where to go next until I do. So I'm just going to pause the recording and mute myself and dry it. All right, so this is fairly dry. There's some bump in the paper. That just means there's still a little moisture here and there. By taking my rubber cement pickup, I'll go a little closer and just show you a little area. I could test the paper just by tapping it and lifting it up. Rather than rubbing it, I can lift it. And you can see it's a little tacky and it gives you a chance to pull it off. This takes a little bit more time to do. And then you just take those little pieces of masking fluid off the tip. It takes a little bit more time to do that, but I recommend it because, like I said, my paper is still a little damp. I could feel the bubble. I could see the bubble. If it doesn't come up, like this one isn't, stop it and move to another spot that is drier. And you'll feel the difference. If you just rub your paper, you're going to ruin the surface. And it could smudge paint that's maybe not dry and really affect the paper in a way that you don't want it to. So if once you feel that little tacky feel, it'll come right off. Okay. Okay, so I've lifted off a lot of masking. This is drier now. There's really no wave in the paper, so I'm able to go a little bit more aggressive with it and really get the masking fluid off. And then just feel your paper to see if there's any spots that you might have missed. And just a few little ones, you could feel the resistance with your finger. So I'm looking at it and I like it. I think it needs more work on it to just build it a little bit more. So as I said before, this is not what I consider the end all be all of the painting. I do need to go in and create a little bit more emphasis on areas. But I could see it better now. So this is where having your reference right by you really helps. Let me explain why, how I do this, okay? If I want to work in on a particular area, I'm going to go in, I'm going to actually say, all right, I want to work this flower here, which is right here. I see the whites. I want to know exactly where my shape is. So by holding my finger where I don't have to look to see and get lost, I could go right to it. Makes it a lot easier. To know exactly where you're going, because at this point, they're just shapes. They're just really odd shapes. And you may want to soften some of those white masking areas, right? So again, I'm going in with my Moon Glow and a little Rosino, and I'm determining exactly where I am with my finger on the, so that I can establish much quicker, much easier, much faster, exactly where I want to go. I don't have to be searching. This helps you not to get lost, which is so easy to do, right? So easy to do. So your paper's drier now, so you're going to get harder marks, which will really suit the shadows and these shapes of the flowers really beautifully. And remember that painting that I showed you early on, where there was blue in some of the flowers. This is a great place to add some blues. Absolutely perfect spot, perfect opportunity, maybe glaze, bridging the palette. If you want an area to look more in shadow, you can glaze that area with some of your blue. Move around, keep moving around. And my goodness, you really can just spend a long joyous time on all of this wonderful opportunities here. They're just endless. If you have a little too much masking, I'm going to show you an idea. I'm going to take my little mop brush. I'm going to grab a little moon glow, a little blue, little pink, a little bit of all that with a lot of water. And I could add a shadow. I need a little bit more. Right? I could glaze right over some of these whites. Tone them down a little bit. That really worked. That really worked. So it's keeping the sun more here on the top and less underneath. I'm going to do that down here again. I'll show you again. A little moon glow, a little pink, a little blue. I have all colors on my brush with water. And I'm just going to really tone down right down here. Go right through those whites. I'm not really pre-mixing anything, guys. So if you feel your whites are just a little too white and they need a little toning down, this is a good way to do it with a glaze. They won't entirely go away, but they're going to sink in a little bit more and not sit so high up on the paper. And there are it's really, you just go absolutely crazy with all the botanical opportunities here.
Jan, your painting is amazing.
Oh,
I've never just sat and watched you paint. I mean, I haven't for, for years.
uh-huh.
And I can't remove the masking right now. So I'm just like looking at that and it's better than the photograph. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you, Amy. Thank you so much for that. I thank you. I really love using a photograph to interpret what I want to create. And that is we started with a beautiful photograph. Thank you so much for this beautiful photograph. Um, and we have the photo, right? We have the photo. So now's the time to make it even more interesting. And each of you are going to have that incredible opportunity to make it your own. So you're just sitting and watching. Okay, that's good. I'm adding a little bit more of that green gold kind of color, just carrying that through a little bit. I think that's a great spot color to kind of help us move our eye through the painting.
The highlights you got with that masking are just beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It really, I thank you. Thank you, guys. You could tone it down. It's kind of like you have this diagonal going this way, but now we also have this diagonal going this way, right? So we're kind of creating a little X composition. That a lot of artists don't think about those kinds of compositions. I like to, whether it's there in the photo or whether I'm creating it. And we're doing a little bit of both here, is a little bit of creating and finding the interesting part of the photograph and wanting to utilize that. Yeah, it's an excellent thing to think about, is how is your eye going to carry through the painting? What is going to and how, how are you going to make it better than the photo? That's and honestly, guys, between you and me and everybody listening to this broadcast here, I don't always end up with the result that I love. I don't. I'm not going to say I get lucky, but I will say that some efforts just pay off a little bit more than other ones, and that's the benefit of putting miles on your brushes, right? Miles on your brushes. Thinking, observing, thinking, and planning, right? All of those things are really I love these little squiggly things. They're really fun. Little moss action going on there. A little bit of different kinds of texture. Sitting on the branches. It's great.
Jan, can you tell us again the colors you used for the petals?
Yeah. Well, so the first wash that we'd used was the ultramarine blue and Guarino violet. I started with that. I didn't start working so into it, and then I started adding the moon glow in areas. And help me out, guys. What else did I do?
Ultramarine.
Ultramarine, a little cerulean, yes. Moon glow, Guarino violet. I really didn't use much of the Holbein. I want to show you guys something. If I were to go in and get my Holbein, right? Clean brush. Here's my lilac. I'm going to show you how opaque this is. Go a little closer. And if you wanted to add opacity, but shapes, well, it's a little too similar, but I could go in there and drop this in. I'm going to go for the lavender. Let me see what the lavender does. It's a little too similar. So if I want to go in and, oh, there it is. See that lavender sitting on top of there? That's really nice. It's like the blue, but it's opaque and it sits on top. Oh, that's nice. I love that. So, and I did use the Holbeins. So right now, this is the Holbein lavender. I really love the Holbein lavender lilac. I've been using that core. I didn't end up using any white, believe it or not, but we could have, if we wanted to add a white into an area that maybe we lost. Let's say I wanted to go in here and add a little bit of white. There we go. Now, if it's wet, it'll melt. If it's dry, it'll sit right on top. I love the variety that you get between wet and dry paper. Just love that. There's a lot of places to get lost in here, a lot of places. But yeah, I'm going to stop and let it breathe for a little bit. I did use... I added a little bit of lemon yellow, green, gold to some of these little squiggly areas and little moss areas. And boy, you could just really go to town and get lost in a lot of different areas here. But where are we with time? All right, 12:30. All right, we got a little bit more time. The drier it is, the greater chance of having some really sharp marks. If it's wet, you're really going to lose them. So you may want them melted. I like to see what happens. Like this really got melted in here, but it's so pretty. I don't mind it. There's a little bit of that. I just dropped in a little bit of that lilac here, guys. Look at this. Right in here. I just added a little bit of, like, maybe there's little petals there. I don't know. But that's that lilac. If you wanted to add that little bit of pop anywhere, that lilac will do it. So knowing which of your paints are more opaque, what they do when it's wet versus what happens when they're on dry, that really does work very well on dry. They have, see what I'm doing, like right over here, I'm just adding like little squiggly marks. And it, you know, you could really add such beautiful interest and layers of things happening on your paper. Where it's blue, it will, that lavender will just dissipate because it's a bluer color, but then go in with a little bit of lavender and boom, it pops right out. And if you make sure, guys, that you have enough deep, dark colors with your branches, right? You really want to have that be very, give yourself good values, because remember what we say, color gets the credit, contrast will do the work.
Jan, that flower looks like it's popping out of the page. It is beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And I know I make it look easy and I work fast, but there's a benefit to me working fast. I can always go in and really, you know, handle so many of the details here. But this is where I stop and say, I look at it again vertically on my screen and I say, do I really want to go further? Can I? Of course I can. We could always add more and more and more. But do I need to? I don't think so.
No.
And this is where I would just say to any of you, and you've heard me say it, sign it, mat it, frame it, hang it. It doesn't need more than what we're giving it. And that's when we know we are, we've sort of had some success. Now, keep in mind, this is the magic mat. You don't like an area? You don't like a composition? You could just change it. You change your composition. Maybe you want it to be more on an angle. Hello. Or straighter. This is, it's not just any mat. It's not limiting you to your edges. It's not limiting you to even your composition. There's nothing here that you're bound to. That even may make it like, I know I turned it a little bit, but that may make it even a little better. There's something that I wanted to explore with you guys, and that was the thought of extremes. So let's say if we just did that, hold on, let me just block this off. And we do an extreme, like, wow, you know what that does? I'll tell you what it does. Well, does anybody want to tell me what you think I'm going to say? No takers.
It just brings your focus to the flower, it looks like. To
Yeah,
that middle flower.
right. So what it does is, even if you did that, like what it does is it is very interesting, guys. And this is really food for thought and something to give you a little further thought. And that is that it takes your viewer's eye beyond your painting, even though the painting stopped. So while I have more to give you, does it really? Yes, of course, I could do much more details in all these areas, but maybe I just make it an extreme. And I say, viewer, have your eye go beyond, and I can't fit that on there. Have your eye go beyond what's there and fill in the blanks. And this is why I love painting this way, is because it gives us a chance to interpret what we see, right? Interpret what we see and take the viewer's eye on exactly what we want them to go on, to show them what we want them to see, to have them go beyond the painting. Where is this taking me? Well, we know there's more to the tree. And even if we looked at the photograph, we know this is, a section of this tree. But now we're going even further with that. And we're saying, go beyond. Take the viewer's eye beyond. Something this idea of extremes. And you know what, you could find so many great extremes in this one painting. I really love this idea. I like it better now that I cropped it.
No,
No?
beautiful.
Well, thank you. I could see adding more details here, on the corners, maybe. I don't know that I want my eye pulled away from it too much. I might actually tone it down a little bit more because this is actually darker than I made it. These are darker, right? So they could go darker. So lots of choices, maybe too many, but lots of choices, lots of opportunities to think beyond just what you painted and what's on your paper, and use your magic mats. I'm going to do a video on the magic mats. Anyway, so I'm going to stop. Obviously, I could keep going. Do I need to? Do I want to? I'm going to give my eye a rest and see how much more I want to do. But right now, yeah, I don't think I'm going to go further right now. Been at it for, a while now, but I really want to see what you guys are doing. So another thing that kind of shifts it from being a watercolor into maybe more multimedia are these pan pastels. And just taking like a stubby little brush, you can go in and grab, let's say I wanted to add white into certain areas. I'm not really a pastel artist, but you can definitely go in, add a little pink in areas, and really have some fun with these. Yeah, these are really fun.
I do have some pastels. I think they're called new pastels. I've never used them, but they're like sticks.
So I do have sticks also. Yes. So
Can
I
I
have
use
some sticks here. Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah.
you could go in and, if you wanted to add some of those other marks, yeah, go ahead. You're allowed. Nobody. Yeah. And that's another good way to get some whites back. So I think that would be, these are a lot of fun. I don't use them often, but I just wanted to show them to you. They're called pan pastels. And these are Daniel Smith. I got like these three color. Oh, I'm sorry. These are Rembrandts. And there's a light yellow ochre, very soft. These are like Jean Brilliant, Boy, you could just have a lot of fun and make really beautiful marks with them. And these are little, things that we add to our paintings. So if you lost your whites, go back and really try to find the shapes. Turn your paper sideways, turn it upside down, look at it in a variety of ways so that you're able to paint the shape and not paint a flower. That's what I did. I painted shapes, not flowers. So yeah, bravo. Well, that's today's class. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you kind of grasp some concepts that every time we use these same ideas, what we're able to do is transcend them into other types of paintings, other things that we're painting. So I hope you're able to do that and have fun and enjoy. And from what I saw, they looked fabulous. So just not done. Anyway, Jan Guarino, Fearless Watercolors. I'll see you again soon. Bye now.